The house my daughter refused to inherit. My daughter once said the house I raised her in was too small, too embarrassing, too old-fashioned. What she didn't know is that one day, that same house would decide her future. Because not every fortune hides behind glass towers. Some hide behind cracked walls, faded paint, and a mother's quiet patience. It was a chilly April morning in New York City, the kind of morning where the air feels heavy with stories nobody wants to tell. I stood by the kitchen window of the house I had lived in for 35 years, the same house where my daughter Rachel took her first steps, painted her first wall, and slammed her first teenage door. Now, that same door stayed closed most days, not because Rachel wasn't home, but because she had stopped coming long ago. She said she needed to get out of that old neighborhood, said success doesn't grow in broken houses. Her words, sharp and clean, cut deeper than she knew. But I didn't argue. I never do. You see, I wasn't raised to fight for people's presence. I was raised to let them go and trust that truth brings them back. That afternoon, as I was tending to the small garden behind my house, the only luxury I allowed myself, my phone buzzed. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I hadn't heard her voice in months. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone polite, distant, the kind of politeness people use with strangers. "Rachel," I replied softly. "How have you been?" "I'm good, Mom. Busy, really busy. You know how it is in the city. Work's insane." Of course, I knew. She was an up-and-coming real estate agent, selling penthouses and luxury condos to people who never worried about price tags. "That's good," I said. "I'm proud of you." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Mom, listen. I need to talk to you about something. About the house." My heart dropped. "What about it?" She hesitated, then said, "You know, that place is getting old. The plumbing, the roof, the street. Have you thought about selling it? You could move somewhere nicer, smaller, more comfortable." I smiled to myself. "Rachel, this house is comfortable. It's my home." She exhaled, frustrated. "Mom, come on. That place is falling apart. And honestly," she paused, "it's not exactly in a good neighborhood anymore." There it was, the shame. The same tone she'd had since she turned 20, when she first started visiting her rich friends' homes. "Rachel," I said gently, "this house raised you. It gave you everything." She stayed silent for a few seconds, then replied, "Yeah, but it's not exactly something to show off, is it?" A few weeks later, Rachel invited me to dinner at her apartment. Her first apartment in Manhattan, a tall, glass-walled beauty with a skyline view and furniture that looked too expensive to sit on. She greeted me with a quick hug. "Mom, you made it. Come in, please take your shoes off. The carpet's new." Her fiancé, Ethan, a corporate banker with a perfect smile, shook my hand. "Mrs. Turner, pleasure to finally meet you." He called me Mrs. Turner. Not Mom, not Ma'am, just distant enough to remind me I didn't belong in their world. We sat down to dinner, grilled salmon, avocado salad, and wine that probably cost more than my month's groceries. "So, Mrs. Turner," Ethan said, "Rachel told me you still live in that old place in Queens." "Yes," I smiled. "It's been home for decades." He nodded politely. "I see. That area's changing." "Gentrifying, you mean?" I asked with a raised eyebrow. He chuckled awkwardly. "Well, sure. But the property values there are nothing compared to the city. I told Rachel we could help you sell it. Get you something modern, safe. Maybe a nice condo closer to downtown." Rachel nodded eagerly. "Exactly, Mom. You don't have to live like that anymore. You could have a gym, a doorman, heating that actually works." I placed my fork down. "Rachel," I said slowly, "this house you're talking about, like it's a burden. That house gave you everything. It paid for your school, your braces, your clothes. Every crack in those walls has a story of us." Rachel looked away. "Mom, I know, but times change. You deserve better." "No," I said softly. "You mean you deserve better than where you came from?" The room went quiet. Even Ethan's confident smile faltered. A few weeks later, Rachel came again. She had a clipboard, contracts, and a tone that screamed professional, not personal. "Mom, listen," she said, flipping through pages. "I had the house appraised. It's worth around $280,000. Not bad, considering the condition." "The condition?" I asked. "Mom, don't get defensive. I'm trying to help. If we sell now, we can get a good deal. You could move somewhere new, maybe Florida. You've always wanted sunshine." I looked at her, studying the way her lips moved, confident, firm, businesslike. She didn't even realize she was talking about our memories like merchandise. "Rachel," I said quietly, "what if I don't want to sell?" She sighed. "Mom, please don't make this difficult. It's just a house." I smiled, a tired smile. "Just a house," I repeated. "If only you knew." She called it just a house. But what she didn't know is that behind every brick, every corner of that home, was a sacrifice she never learned about. And soon she'd find out the truth she'd been running from all her life. That night, after Rachel left with her fancy clipboard and sharp heels clicking against my old wooden floor, the house felt quieter than usual. The ticking clock echoed like a heartbeat, the kind that reminded you you're still here. But the laughter that once filled these walls is long gone. I walked through the hallway, fingers tracing the faded wallpaper. There, just beside the staircase, were faint pencil marks Rachel's height chart from when she was little. I whispered, "You used to beg me to measure you every month, just to see how tall you were getting." And now, she stood taller than I ever imagined. But not in the way I hoped. I stopped in front of an old wooden chest in the corner of the living room. It had been sitting there for years, untouched. Inside were letters, photos, and papers I'd promised myself I'd show Rachel one day. But that day never came. Until now. The next morning, I brewed my coffee, sat by the window, and opened the chest. Inside were 2 envelopes, one labeled "Rachel, open when you're ready," and another marked "For attorney, safe deposit." Beside them lay an old photo me, my late husband Michael, and baby Rachel in front of the house. Back then, the porch was freshly painted, the garden full, and my husband's smile brighter than the morning Sunday. He had built this house himself, every nail, every wall, every inch of it. We were broke, but he said, "As long as Rachel has a roof that's ours, she'll never feel small in this big world." He died when Rachel was only 8, after years of working 2 jobs to pay off the mortgage. And the only reason this house ever stayed ours was because he refused to let the bank take it. A week later, Rachel came again, this time without Ethan. She stood at the doorway, hesitant. Her usual city confidence was replaced by something softer, maybe guilt. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked. "Of course," I said, motioning her in. "Sit down." She looked around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. Her eyes caught the old photo frames, the curtains, the small flower vase by the window. "Mom," she began, "I'm sorry about last time. I shouldn't have pushed you about selling. I just..." I thought it'd make things easier. I nodded. I know you meant well. She sighed and rubbed her temples. It's just, Ethan and I have been looking for houses lately, and it's hard not to compare. I smiled faintly. And what do you see when you compare? She hesitated. That I wanted to run away from here, from everything that reminded me of being small. I reached into the chest and pulled out the envelope with her name. Rachel, I said softly. I was going to wait until you were ready, but I think this is your time. She frowned, confused, as I handed her the letter. What's this? Something your father left for you. She looked startled. Dad? I nodded. He wrote it when he got sick. I never had the heart to give it to you until now. This was not the set of rectors. She unfolded it carefully, and as she began reading, her voice trembled. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, it means I'm not around anymore. But I hope by now you've grown strong, brave, and maybe even a little stubborn, just like your mom. This house you grew up in, it's not just wood and bricks. Every beam was bought with extra shifts. Every wall was painted after midnight, and every nail was hammered with love. When people tell you it's small, remember it's built from dreams, not money. One day, the world will try to make you forget where you came from. Don't let it. Because this house isn't your past. It's your proof that love can build anything. Love always, Dad. Rachel's eyes glistened as she folded the letter back with shaking hands. I didn't know, she whispered. He built this himself? I nodded. With his own hands, Rachel. He didn't even hire a builder. Said no stranger could build the walls that would raise his daughter. Rachel looked around again, tears forming. I've been selling other people's homes for years, she said, and I didn't even understand what home meant. That night, a heavy storm hit New York. Thunder, rain, the kind that rattles windows and shakes the roof. And then, the ceiling in the kitchen began to leak. Water dripped onto the counter, forming small puddles. Mom! Rachel shouted, rushing to grab a bucket. It's okay, I said calmly, already holding towels. But Rachel looked panicked, frustrated. How can you live like this? You shouldn't have to patch leaks alone. I smiled. This house has weathered worse. So have I. It's not in the markings card. She looked at me, drenched and emotional, and said something I hadn't heard in years. Mom, let me stay tonight. I nodded, silently. It was the first time she'd stayed in this house in over 6 years. That night, as the rain poured and thunder rolled, Rachel slept in her old bedroom, the one with glow-in-the-dark stars still on the ceiling. And for the first time, she didn't dream of leaving. The daughter who once rejected her childhood home had just spent her first night there in years. But what she didn't know was that her father had left behind one last secret. A secret hidden in the walls of the very house she called too small. She spent one night in the house she once called too small. She came for real estate, but stayed for memories. And before the storm cleared, she was about to uncover something that would change her forever. The sun rose pale and quiet over Queens. Rainwater sparkled on the street like broken glass, and the city hummed back to life. Rachel woke up to the faint smell of coffee and pancakes, the same smell she used to wake up to as a child. She stepped into the kitchen, her hair messy, eyes tired but soft. Morning, Mom, she said, her voice small. I smiled. Morning, sweetheart. You still take your coffee the same way? She blinked, surprised. 2 sugars and a dash of milk? I handed her the mug. Some things don't change. Rachel took a sip and looked around the chipped counters, the faded curtains, the photos taped to the fridge. Every flaw looked human now, warm. "Mom," she whispered, "I never realized how alive this house feels." "This cried is russet is one of the matters," I smiled. "Because it was never made to impress people. It was made to keep hearts safe." After breakfast, I went to do the dishes, and Rachel began exploring the attic. It had been locked for years, since the year her father passed. Dust floated in the sunlight as she opened the old door. The air smelled like old wood, paint, and nostalgia. She looked around. Boxes labeled Christmas, baby clothes, old bills. And then, in the corner, she saw a wooden panel slightly loose in the wall. Curious, she pulled it open. Behind it was a small metal tin, sealed with a note taped across. "For Rachel, when you find your way back home." Her breath caught. She opened it. Inside was another letter, and a small velvet box. Rachel unfolded the letter with trembling hands. "My little girl, if you found this, it means you came back. Maybe not for the reasons I hoped, but you came back and that's enough. You see, this house wasn't just built to keep us warm. It was built to keep something safe for you. In the velvet box, there's a key. It opens the safe in the basement, the one your mother never told you about. Inside that safe are the deeds, the savings, and the future I worked for. Not just money hope. But remember this, Rachel. If you open that safe without understanding what this home means, you'll lose more than you'll ever gain. Love, Dad." Rachel opened the small velvet box with shaking fingers. Inside, nestled in faded red fabric, was a silver key. She ran downstairs. "Mom, there's something in the attic. Dad left me a letter. He left a key." I froze, soap still on my hands. I had known about the safe, but not the letter. He must have hidden it after his diagnosis, quietly planning for this moment. We went down to the basement together. It smelled like dust and old paint, with faint light coming through the narrow window. Rachel knelt beside an old workbench and brushed away debris until a small metal door appeared. The safe. She inserted the key, turned it slowly. Click. Inside were papers, an envelope, and an old jewelry box. The envelope read, "To my family, for when you're ready to build again." Rachel opened it and gasped. Inside were stock certificates, savings bonds, and $75,000 in cash, money her father had secretly saved, investing small amounts every year. Tears filled her eyes. "Mom, he left us this? All this time?" I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "He wanted you to have a safety net," he said. "If Rachel ever loses her way, let the house show her the path." Rachel sank to the floor, sobbing. I was trying to sell the very thing that protected me. That evening, Rachel sat on the porch steps. The sun was setting, bathing the neighborhood in gold. She turned to me and said softly, "Mom, I'm sorry." "For what, sweetheart?" "For everything. For being ashamed of where I came from. For thinking that money made a home. For treating this house like a burden." I placed my hand over hers. "You just forgot what love feels like when it's simple. But it's still there." Rachel looked out toward the street, eyes glistening. "You know, when I started in real estate, I used to think success was about square footage. But this house taught me something else." "What's that?" "That the biggest homes are the ones built with love, not walls." A month later, Rachel surprised me with a call. She said, "Mom, can you come downtown? I want to show you something." I arrived to find her standing in front of a small real estate office, but this one had a new name on the sign. Turner Homes. Because every story deserves a roof. Rachel smiled proudly. I'm starting my own firm. I don't want to just sell houses anymore. I want to help people find homes. I felt my throat tighten. She had finally come full circle. And the first listing? I asked. She grinned. Our house. Not for sale, just for show. I want people to see where dreams begin. The house my daughter refused to inherit became the one that taught her what inheritance really means. Not money, not walls, but the love that survives inside them. Sometimes the places we're most ashamed of are the ones that built our strength, and sometimes it takes losing sight of home to finally understand what it means to have one. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of what home really means. And if you love stories that speak to the soul, hit that subscribe button and join our family. More emotional stories are coming soon, because every story deserves to be heard.